Our Silver Fox, Ray Watson, is going to lead this with Ron Wilkinson and Eric Skolnick. And this is designed to be fairly interactive, so I would enjoy this because right after this, David Duda is going to actually take on this very topic and expand on it as it related specifically to his company. So, welcome Ray Watson, the CEO Nexus.
The red one, there's a pointer.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, hello. We've been hearing this morning about things that I think you need to be aware of to shore up your business. And I spend a lot of my time facilitating CEO groups. And we spend time on making sure that your core processes, your right people in your right seats, the data, the leading indicators are in place. Because that's the first step, because if you've got a tight organization and a downturn comes, then you're going to be much better prepared to withstand that. But what we're going to talk about with Blue Ocean Strategy is how do we get outside of what we're actually doing today and become in that blue ocean. The book came out in 2005. I'm sure many of you have read it. And what it basically talks about is to take a look at what you're doing now and see if you can operate in an area that becomes the blue ocean and is not in the red ocean with the sharks. And we'll talk about some examples of this. But if you take a look at the slide up here, and I'll ask for a show of hands when we get a chance to look at that, is that where are you competing today? Are you in the blue ocean or are you in the red ocean with all the sharks? So if you look at this, you'll see that you're competing in existing market space. Whatever industry you're in, are you operating within the traditional confines of that industry? Are you out there to beat the competition? In other words, you're fighting against the competition. You're basically exploiting current demand. You're more of a market share. In other words, the industry is X and I'm getting so much of that industry. And you're making that value cost trade-off in terms of low price, value, etc. And are you making a differentiation in that? In terms, are you trying to be an innovative offering or are you competing on price? On the other side of it is to create an uncontested marketplace. And we'll see some examples of this. And the big thing is to make your competition irrelevant. It'd be great if we could do that. Yeah. And it is possible. But anyway, you can read the rest of that. But you can see basically you're either swimming in the red ocean with the sharks, or you've created an opportunity outside of the red ocean where you're not competing with everybody, and you've kind of created your own niche out there. So by a show of hands, how many people are currently operating in the blue ocean? Great, great. Because if you're in that blue ocean, you're differentiated yourself outside of what the traditional challenges are if you're operating in that with the sharks. So it's basically about not risk-taking, but to minimize the risk to your business. Let's look at some examples. And in your book, I noticed they came a little skewed. So if you're following along in your book, you can kind of line those things up a little bit. But some of these are out of the book, and I'm going to give you a little more detail on them. But Circuit Filet against primarily the traditional circuses. Yellowtail Wine versus your traditional wines and outlets. Southwest Airlines. I remember I was living in Dallas in the early days of Southwest Airlines, and they certainly differentiated themselves. In fact, I just saw a survey that they were rated one of the highest customer satisfaction airlines out there. But I remember back when they were really starting out, and I flew a lot around in Texas, and they operated out of Love Field. where the other airlines operated out of DFW, which was a fairly new built airport at the time. If you went to DFW, they had to kind of take a lot of trams around to get from one terminal to the other, and you needed change. And so if you put $1 in to get change, you got 95 cents back. If you happened to get change at Love Field, where Southwest operated, you got $1.05 back. And so they made airline travel fun. There was unlimited cocktails flying between Dallas and Houston, or particularly so if you got on a flight coming back from Lubbock into Dallas, you know, the booze was free. So they did a lot of things that really built the fun part. It made flying fun. And they differentiated themselves from the other traditional airlines. Uber, Lyft, I mean, look what's happened. I mean, if you own a taxi medallion in New York City that you paid $1 million for, it is absolutely worthless today. I don't know if there's anybody here from Mears, but Mears was looking to expand significantly. They didn't, because Uber came along. So, same with Airbnb, and obviously with Apple. Remember when we had to listen to every voicemail to answer, and then Apple comes along and we can select those that we want to look at or that we want to respond to. This is a busy chart, and I'll kind of take you through a little bit of it. Let me step out of the way. What this is the chart that kind of looks, that Circus Delay utilized to kind of look at how do we get into the blue ocean. So the bottom part here, right here, is basically we want to reinvent the circus. Now, back in the early days with Ringling Brothers, thing's not pointing well here, but there we go. I remember as a kid growing up in Melbourne over here, the circus would come to town. Ringling Brothers or some of the other circuses, and it was a big event. Free-range circus outside, lion tamers, all this sort of stuff. But if you look in there at the red ocean that they were competing in at the time against their competitors, they had to have star performers. Now, those with gray hair like me might remember Emmett Kelly, who was a well-known clown with Ringling Brothers. And he was a star performer, as were some of the high wire acts that they had. They had concessions, much like you have at football games now, fun and humor with the clowns, and the thrill and dangers with the lion tamers and the aerial acrobatics. But that was as it is. Here comes Circus Delay along, and they said, what can we do differently to look at that market and get into the blue ocean? So what they look at, what to be, not as is. And I guess that's a key word as you go back to your offices and think about where you need to go, think about where you need to be, not where just you are. So if you look at the overlay there, and I'm going to go to the next slide to get a little more detail, the middle thing here is just a bunch of metrics that they utilized, leading indicators, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, that they utilized. But let's go, and remember right here is we want to reinvent the circus. So you'll see this slide a few times with some of the other examples. But remember those words on the top as you're looking at your own blue ocean potential strategy. To eliminate, reduce, raise, and create to swim out into that blue ocean. So if you'll see, the red lines were Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and the other traditional circus operators. And if you'll see along the bottom here is the various things. So if we look at eliminate, but they said let's eliminate star performers. In fact, Eric, I think, told me the other day that most of the people in Circus Delay are Olympians, gymnasts. Not necessarily the top tier, but gymnasts that they brought in. So not star named performers. They did away with the animal shows. I think PETA might have had a little something to do with that, because there was a lot of, obviously, the way the animals were kept and trained. No aisle concessions, and no more the train or the 18-wheelers pulling in and setting up these tents. I know they kind of migrated more to facilities to do the circus, but at one time, you know, the trucks would roll into town and the big top would go up, and but that was expensive. So they looked at a lot of costs here. They wanted to reduce but not eliminate the fun and humor and the thrills and danger. But what they did want to do is a unique venue, a theme, and artistic music and dance. And they also got a good price. So that was the value canvas that Circus du Soleil looked at against who their competition was, which was traditional circuses. And I think we can see that they've been highly successful. Another one is Yellowtail Wine. Again, these are, if you haven't read the book, get the book, and it gives a little more detailed information on this. But this is just another example of how somebody, we're not talking technology here, we're just talking about a different focus as to how they addressed a traditional market. So Yellowtail Wine, you may recall, if you've ever been to a 7-Eleven or a convenience store, you got Yellowtail Wine there. So what did they do? Let me go to the next slide, I think. So in the Ray's area, the price is up a little bit over your budget wines. They eliminated a lot of the mystique about wine. In other words, bouquet and all this stuff, and they eliminated the push on vineyards. In other words, they took wine down to the common person. That's why they started going into convenience stores. They were going after the beer drinkers. They were going after the people that were going into the 7-Elevens or what have you, and on the way out you could see Yellowtail Wine. They only had two flavors, or two. They had white and they had red. Yellowtail Wine is an Australian vineyard. So down here, you notice they took away, whoops, I did something here and just blew this away. You know what I'm going to get this back? Oh, there we go, okay, easy enough. So down here on the reduced, the prestige of wine was taken away. The wine complexity and the wine range was taken away. They created easy drinking, easy selection. You only had two choices. And Yellowtail Wine has become, and is very successful, but they looked at the marketplace of wine as being crowded and complex. And they wanted to rise against the Mad Dog 2020s of the world, but still wanted to offer a quality wine, but below the traditional wines. And they found that niche, and they got into the blue ocean in a very crowded, established marketplace. McDonald's had no idea about blue ocean strategy back when they got together, when Ray Kroc got with the McDonald brothers and started McDonald's. Now, whether they went through this process or not, I don't know. But the process that they consciously went through the process. But if you look at this, they were competing back then with kind of the local store, the local restaurants. I think, does anybody remember Howard Johnson's? They don't exist anymore. But Howard Johnson's was out there at the time. They were kind of the Denny's, I guess, of the time. But if you look at what McDonald's did, and if you look through that, put it into that reduce, create, eliminate model that I'm talking about, they got rid of waiters, table settings, and menu selections. That was costly in those traditional restaurants. They became everywhere. They were seen. You can't go anywhere without seeing a McDonald's. And they looked at speed, quality, kid-friendly, and maintained a relative price. But they looked at the marketplace as it was, and they visioned where it needs to be. And that's how McDonald's launch. Now, obviously, another good point is that you don't get in the blue ocean and just stay there. You've got to innovate and continue to look at maintaining that blue ocean ability because as we saw with Apple, once Google got into the game, Apple didn't quite have that blue ocean to itself in some of these other things that you'll see. So you have to continue to innovate. And again, I want to re-emphasize, shore up your current operation, but make sure you're spending some time thinking about how to move beyond where I am today. This is a mind map, and again, I'll let you explore that more in your handout. But this is just a lot of questions, a lot of things to stimulate your thinking with you and your leadership team about how to look at a blue ocean. For example, again, the reduce, eliminate, create, and raise. How is your industry operating today? What can you eliminate from that? What can you create? What can you reduce? What can you save? And so that you're, yes ma'am.
You brought up an interesting point when you were talking about McDonald's, because I don't know how many people here know McDonald's owners, but one of the problems they're having right now is that they are losing their market share and they don't know how to innovate even when they get together. So my question always is, if you're sitting there with your best team that you have available on the national level and on your regional level and you all are still having issues, what do you do? Hire somebody on the outside, get a medium?
I guess if I had the answer to that, that'd be a big demand. But basically, I think what happens is, and we've seen it over and over again, is that businesses start to rest on their laurels. In other words, you've got success. You've got, you're building your brand, you're known. Well, there's somebody else coming in behind you that's going to do the same thing in terms of how do we get out in front of you. I read an article somewhere in the last week or so. It said that somewhere, somebody in the world is coming up with an idea that will put you out of business. Mm-hmm. So you got to think about that. And so McDonald's went to sleep at the switch a little bit, and some of these other players got into the game and surpassed them in some of the blue ocean stuff that they used or did them one up. So again, the example of Apple. Having all the market share in a smartphone to losing it to some competitors. So if you get out there, you got to stay out there, and you're not going to stay out there if you don't continue to innovate. Again, the idea is you're probably spending, probably close to 100% of your time in your businesses dealing with business issues. You come into work in the morning and you've got distractions and interruptions, and you've got customer problems, and you've got this and that and the other thing. But you've got to take time to kind of think about outside of what you're doing so that you can continue to innovate in a market where you are. And again, it does not have to be technology based. It can be marketing based. It can be looking at within your traditional customer base and how can I expand that. Based on my core competences that I have in my organization, what other things can I provide to the customers I already have to expand that base and stay alert and sharp as far as the competition goes. So I'm not going to go through all that, look at it in your book, but it's just kind of thought provokers in terms of a mind map in thinking about the blue ocean. So value innovation. Again, we don't want to just have a low price or an innovation. We want to have an innovation with a low price because we brought efficiencies into what we're doing. So I'll just read this to you, but value innovation places equal emphasis on value, price, or perceived value, which comes from price, and innovation. Value innovation is a new way of thinking about and executing strategy that results in the creation of a blue ocean. The creation of blue oceans is about driving costs down while simultaneously driving value up for buyers. They're not exclusive, they are combined. Remember that slide before, it's not about risk taking, it's about risk avoidance. And if you think through this, it's possible. So that's a good slide to take a look at as kind of guide your thinking. 6 principles of blue ocean, just in the potential risks to think through. I think number 5 there is an interesting one because like anything that you're doing in your organization, you've got to have buy-in. You've got to have a culture that buys into what you're doing so that you're not just leading the charge and nobody's following. So you got to build that culture of innovation and get teamwork and get everybody bought into what you're doing. But again, a lot of this is brought out in much more detail in the book. So if you haven't read the book, get the book and go through it. And then it's mentioning the various risks associated with some of these strategies. So what I would say, here's your homework. Here's your agenda. So when you get back and you get your leadership team together, is just kind of go through some of that. Number 1, understand what blue ocean means, and a blue ocean is a term out of the book. What it really means is I'm going to innovate beyond where I currently am. I'm going to take my core competences and my people and my technology and move it out beyond where I'm currently operating. And think about ways and means in which I can deliver outside of what I'm doing and what my competition may be doing, so that you then make competition somewhat irrelevant. But again, you can't go to sleep. Once you do it, you got to keep doing it. So if you create a culture of innovation in blue ocean, then you can perpetuate that. But it's got to be part of your culture. So I think you've got the handouts in the book, and you can follow that.
I can't read that. Can anybody else read that in the book?
Can you read it in the book? It's pretty much that.
Okay.
Just kind of shown in an agenda
No,
format.
I can't read.
So, any questions on this before I bring up Eric? So, a couple of you say you're in the blue ocean. So reevaluate, are you really in the blue ocean? And the way to measure that is, have you made competition irrelevant? So what I want to do now is bring up Eric Skolnick, because he is an example of having created locally, local guy, creating a blue ocean strategy in a very crowded marketplace, which is insurance and employee benefits. So Eric?
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir.
All of our information is in the back, so if you need us to email you anything, just email one of us and we can get it to you ASAP.
Nicole, you're the best.
I love you, Eric. Friends forever.
My name is Eric Skolnick. Thanks for having me here. And I always tell people, and how many are college football fans? Okay, quite a few of you. I'm not an LSU fan. Okay, it's just a purple. It's not a purple. It's purple tie because my wife loves purple. All right. So appreciate you having me. I always tell people, and I have 2 adopted kids, 6, and every day when I see them off to school, I say learn something new. And that's how I live every day. So I always tell people, you don't know where you're going until you know where you are. All right. And so my consulting firm, what we do is we come in, got an engineering background, and spoke to a bunch of engineers over here, and we've got a process of how we help people. Okay. What's your number 1 expense within your organizations? Payroll. What's your number 2 expense? Benefits, right? So you got to control them. How many had double-digit increases this past year? Quite a few, right? Okay, so where are you? Health industry, Affordable Care Act. Is it affordable? It's not. It's a train wreck. All right, I live it every day. Okay, I used to be 6'4". I get beat down every day. All right, I used to be as tall as you. All right, not anymore. All right, so what happens is you're dealing with these increases, so you have to deal with the structure of a company. How many of you are familiar with what a PEO is? Leased employees, right? All right, but there's also a hybrid called an HRO, okay? Human resource outsourcing. There's also an HRIS model, Human Resource Information Systems, okay? And also, The name of my company, Strategic Partners, there's numerous folks in here that help me, okay? 4 years ago, I had all these companies coming to me wanting to buy my company. I sat down with Ray and a bunch of other CEOs, and people were just throwing daggers at me. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? I didn't sell. One of the best decisions I made, okay? Also, gentleman right here, Mike Pesci, okay? He's an HR consultant. He worked with one of my international clients, helping out on HR consulting. Another one of my clients, here locally, they're a telemarketing company, all right? They need, and because of how they're contracted, guess who I work with? Nicole McMurray, okay? And they're now one of her top clients because she's helping staffing them, okay? I help people go into and out of PEOs. Well, guess what? If you're doing that, you're making a cost-effective model for them. Sometimes you need to have people, right? Nicole just helped me place a person that went into the company, and now we're assisting on what's called a PEO takeaway, okay? It's gonna put them in a better situation, okay? National trend is 12%. That means if we group the entire United States together, everybody's getting a 12% increase. Tell you what, did you get a 12% raise last year? No. It's unsustainable, all right? So how can you address this, okay? I just worked with a client, and I put them on a 2-year plan. We're into their 3rd year. Over a 2-year period, we saved them $1.2 million. They're over in Titusville. They're headquartered over there, right around 200 employees. Saved them a boatload of money. Guess what? We're back, already did the mid-year review with them, went through everything. They're back at double digits again. So guess what I have to do? The shell game. I gotta work with the designs, I gotta work with the specs, put those things all together to try to make it cost effective for them. Their employees aren't getting double digit increases. Another client, telemarketing company here in town. They just got a 58% increase, okay? It's the worst one I've seen in 8 years. And they're like 150 employees. It's a total train wreck. I'm going in, CEO, the controller, they're all over me, okay? I had to take them back into a PEO. We saved them $369,000, got them better plans, okay? But it's a shell game, right? Got a technical background. I'm blessed. Nicole knows many of my colleagues, as does Craig, and I'll touch base with you in a second. But I'm blessed because they're all smarter than I am. And I tell them they make me taller, faster, and better looking, and I go, they have to work overtime to do that. So that client, we just helped them out, restructured all the benefits. There's a, here in town, they're a medical imaging company, and like 160 employees, and they had a 35.1% increase last year. And they're all ex-GTE folks, and I got shredded, and I was able to get it down with the current carrier down to a 12% renewal, and the CEO looked at me and he goes, unacceptable. And I go, well, can I tweak the plans a little bit because they have really rich plans? He said, absolutely not. You're not messing with my employees' benefits. So we had to rework everything, switched everything, I bundled it all together, put it with Cigna, got them down to a 2% increase, better benefits. Plus I put them on a level funded plan, okay? So, 8 years ago, I was brought into a client, and a few of the folks that I work with are not in here today, but why I'm called Strategic Partners is because I have folks that help me out with staffing, folks that help me out with individual plans, HR consulting, business consulting, other folks that aren't in here are payroll folks, work comp, okay? You can't be everything to everybody, right? But if you surround yourself with the right people, the strategic partners, you can help people. That's what we do. I was brought into a client, they're a national ministry, 8 years ago. And I was brought in by ADP, and they said, hey, help us fix this client. They're broken. They had like 183 employees. They're not-for-profit, okay? They don't have huge increases and huge bonuses and that type of stuff. And I was brought in, did a PEO takeaway, saved them right around $400,000. CFO, every time she sees me, I get a hug and a kiss. All right? And by the way, once I explain to you what we did for them and how we created our blue ocean, which blue's my favorite color, that's why, we're gonna do that route. But anyhow, so we saved them and helped them, all right? But this was right when the Affordable Care Act was all going on, right? And, I call it the boiling frog effect, We all know you put a frog in water and you start heating it up. Well, that's what happened with the Affordable Care Act, right? Well, all these folks, it's really expensive and it's adding up. Well, this is a national ministry. How many of you are familiar with Sharing Ministries and know what that is? Okay? Handful of you? Okay? It's based upon the Bible. Okay? And it states, for the body does not consist of one member, but of many. And so, if we can all come together to assist, and I pray every day, and I always say, one of the things I always say is, God grant me serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage of things that things I can. All right? And the thing is, I saw this. The executives came to me, and they're like, we're broken. And I said, oh yeah, you are. And they're a sharing ministry. There's 5 of them nationally. Okay? And what happened is the federal government gave them an exemption. Okay? They're not an insurance company, but if we had all of us in this room and we were one company, people talk about self-funded plans, partially self-funded plans, level-funded plans, fully insured. That's what we do, right? Well, if we had all of us together, we all have different backgrounds, different health issues, things that are going on. I have 2 adopted 6-year-olds. My son has seizure issues, so there's all different types of things. But if you group us all together, and you can pay in and then pay out to assist each other, that's what happens within a sharing ministry. But you know what happened? They were on a fully insured plan. They're getting double-digit increases. And I'm talking, this is back when the carriers were hammering people with 70% increases, 60% increases. And they came to me and they said, Eric, it's unsustainable. We can't do this. Can you help us? I said, let me figure it out. It took me about 2 years. And what I did is I designed what they're not, okay? They're not preventative care. They're not RX. They're not dental. They're not vision. They're not life insurance. They're not disability. So I designed around it. And then what I did is we put it together. And again, this is why the CFO really likes me. They've not had an increase going on 5 years now. Okay? How we structured things. They've had no increases. So then what happened, and I like to say it was my idea, it wasn't. Their director of program development came to me about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, said, you've saved us so much money and put us in such a better situation. Remember I told you they had the federal exemption? Individuals had the federal exemption. Their lobbyists up in DC, oopsie, guess what he forgot? He didn't take care of the organizations. So if you're a religious school, a church, or some type of religious organization, you didn't get the exemption. You were still mandated by the Affordable Care Act. How can you get around that? Remember, I said we solved problems, we mitigated the risk. So what I did is I designed around it. Again, it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years, and we launched it. And we call it Christian Benefit Solutions. And Craig right here, if you guys don't know Craig, I call him the tallest man in the insurance business. But when it comes to individual plans, those type of things, he tied in and helped us out. Okay, last year, because it was growing so quickly, I needed help. Guess who helped me hire the person? Nicole. It's growing right now, quicker. We've closed over 40 groups. We launched it right at the end of Q4 last year, and we closed 40 groups. Earlier, Eric and everybody else was saying, what's your sales cycle? My traditional side of the business, my typical sales cycle, correct? You know this. It's about 2 years, 3 years. Because I tell people, whether it's love, business, or sports, it's all timing. You need to be right in the right place at the right time to be able to assist people and put them in a better situation. All right? So what we did is we put the preventative care, the RX, the medical coverage, which, by the way, is the sharing ministry. And there's 5 of them. We can work with all 5. And we're asked that all the time. So we can plug and play, and then we put everything else around it. So when you're at your corporation right now, how many have medical insurance in here? Almost everybody, right? Do you have life insurance, dental, vision? But not everybody all has the same, right? We create options for you so you can go ahead and pick and choose what's best for you and your family. And my thing is I always tell every one of my clients, be an informed consumer. And a few weeks ago, and those that go on meetings with me a lot, we always have pre-meetings and post-meetings for a review. And one of my colleagues last week said, he goes, Eric, you're not a sales guy. And he goes, I love you. He goes, you're an architect, but you're not a sales guy. And I hugged him. I said, you know something? You're right. We solve problems. And we lay it out. What's your goal? What's your objectives? What are your challenges? Okay? So we've now created this. This is our blue ocean. The sales cycle, depending on the size of the organization, is much shorter. As I mentioned, we already closed over and assisted 40 organizations since January. Now, how many are aware that with President Trump, he's saying, hey, can we go towards associations? That's what this is. This is Association of Churches. It's tied in with it. So the next step of this as well is we're tying it in with the small organizations and the large organizations, and that's the blue ocean that we've created. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
And how do you determine, when you're talking about the benefits, that when we talk about medical coverage, that they're covering the physicians that, or the physicians are a member of the plan that they're going to, or the pharmaceuticals, that they should be using, and not through PBMs that they're rebates on?
Mm-hmm.
Those are huge parts of the cost of medical care.
Correct.
And how do you deal with it?
How do you deal with it is, again, you create options, because take a look out the parking lot. Does everybody drive a black truck? I drive a silver sedan. You create options for them. Okay, so what we did is we created like a base plan, and then a buy-up plan, and then also the network that this is designed on. It's the second largest network in the nation. Okay, but also if a doctor, and you can't force a doctor to be in a network. There's numerous doctors, because of the Affordable Care Act and because of the cost cutting and everything, they went to what they call concierge service. They don't even take insurance. So it comes down to you, again, being an informed consumer. Me, years ago, I had to have sinus surgery, all right? And I had to do a flush every day, a Zyrtec and all that. It's all because of allergies. Well, I go to Walgreens. Ask, be an informed consumer, what's my best way to get this drug? Believe it or not, my insurance didn't cover as much as a Walgreens discount card did. Okay? You can go to GoodRx online, be an informed consumer. Okay? Did that help?
I've been in the industry for over 50 years, so
Okay.
you know, I deal with this on a daily basis. People who have chronic diseases, who are really critically ill,
Right.
and dealing with some of these things is sometimes a challenge for them, because then they go into Medicaid, and then it's managed Medicaid, and the only thing they do is manage access.
Medicaid, Medicare, personal lines guru, right here. So when it comes to all that, just so you know, strategic partner, that's who I go to. All right. Here's another question over here. Okay. Okay.
Great job.
Thank you very much. And Nicole, thanks for not picking on me. I'm going to introduce Ron Wilkinson. Ron Wilkinson, when I asked him the other day, I go, how many years have you been in the industry? And he said 200 and something. All right. But what we just did, and Ray got us all teed up. Ron's going to come up. He's with In Perspective Financial Services. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, right? We're just talking about the blue ocean and creating your blue ocean. I know numerous of you put your hands up, you're creating your blue ocean. Ron's going to talk about some of the situations that he was with organizations and assisting them to try to help them find that and navigate their blue ocean. Okay, Ron?
Thank you very much. Go ahead, I'll let you hook me up. Thank you. Do I just hold that and stand there?
Yeah, you got it. There you go. I just put it in my pocket.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am going to try to move this along because I know that we're a little bit behind and everybody's got things to do. So, I'm actually going to talk about, 10 or 12 years ago, I met a man here in Orlando who became a mentor of mine. He he convinced me that being a consultant was a lot more fun, and he was right, than being a CFO for just one company. And so I have followed him for many, many years, and he taught me a lot of things. He was an amazing guy. He was single-handedly responsible for Starbucks moving across the country from the West Coast to the East Coast. He helped Barney's Coffee grow from nothing to amazing. He worked with Blockbuster. He worked with a lot of different companies. And I called him and I said, give me an example of a company that you worked with that should have followed a Blue Ocean strategy, could have followed a Blue Ocean strategy, and didn't, and subsequently failed. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Rather than use experiences in companies where I work, I thought this would be more interesting because everybody could relate to, well, Blockbuster. So could a Blue Ocean strategy have saved Blockbuster? He worked with Wayne Huizenga for many, many years and counseled him, and, well, Wayne listened sometimes and other times not so much. Blockbuster opened its first store in 1985, grew to well over 5,000 retail stores and over 60,000 employees, and their revenues were amazing. This is back, of course, when, those of you who remember the VHS tapes, if you tried to go buy one in the store for your favorite movie, I remember buying Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie. I paid like $80 for it, and I thought I had gotten a bargain. I still have it. I don't ever use it. I can't use it. I have no VHS. I've got no VCR. You can't throw it away for $80.
I'll think. I have a VHR.
In 1997, okay, so Blockbuster now is operating, it's doing great things. In 1997, a young man went to Blockbuster to rent a movie. He rented Apollo 13. Forgot to bring it back and then lost it. Blockbuster charged him $40. He got upset. He said, this can't be. By the way, late fees were one of the main ways that Blockbuster made its money. In fact, it was a crucial piece of their strategy. Reed Hastings said, I'm not going to do this. And so he created Netflix. Netflix was born. But this was his Blue Ocean strategy, although I'm sure he didn't call it that. He did it with no new technology, but yet a new business model. It was the same stuff. It's just, how is he going to deliver to the customer? And you all know what Netflix started out as originally. It was a mail order business. But he started to eat into the competition. So 3 years later, in the year 2000, he's the little guy on the left, and he goes to Blockbuster, who at this point is a pretty big giant, and says, I think I'd like for you to buy me, or I'd like to partner with you or something. John Antioco, who at the time was the CEO, one of a long line of CEOs that had come and gone to Blockbuster, said, now we like our brick and mortar. This is the way of the future. Take your ideas and see you later. His first mistake. There was a Blue Ocean staring him in the face. He said goodbye. In the year 2007, Netflix starts its streaming service. What Antioco didn't see, he wasn't looking around him at what technology was bringing to our country. He didn't see the opportunities and the necessary paths that we were going to go down. And he sat back on his heels, and in 2007, when this happened, again, they ignored it. They really didn't do anything. And by the way, prior to this, in the year 2002, it's not going to be up on the screen, Redbox started its business. And as you know, Redbox was actually, McDonald's funded Redbox. McDonald's was the one that financially backed Redbox, and for its first year, all Redbox did was sell products and little food bits and things. It was called something different. But after a year or so, McDonald's said, we don't want these in our stores anymore. So Greg, can't think of his last name now, but the guy that founded Redbox, he decided that he was going to put DVDs in his machines, and he started putting them, the places that you know, and he became a competitor. So still, Blockbuster is doing the same thing they always did. Well, in the year 2010, 3 years later after that, Blockbuster could not handle the competition anymore. They filed bankruptcy, and they were on life support. And then from then until now, it was basically rest in peace. One by one, by the dozens and the hundreds, their stores closed. And I think there's one left now that's owned by Dish Network somewhere.
Alaska.
And they're closing.
There you go.
We prolonged it death.
There you go. So So many of you familiar with the story, clearly, what could they have done? What blue ocean strategies could they have employed? Well, many, because they didn't even have to think about them. They were happening. They presented themselves to Blockbuster. Redbox even went to Blockbuster at one point and said, please buy us, and they said no. They just weren't thinking ahead. They weren't doing what everyone today has been talking about up here, and that is examine your company, examine what you're doing, examine the landscape around you, watch the technologies. Where is it going, and how are you going to exploit those things to be different? What's your point of differentiation? What's your blue ocean? They could have looked outside their current business model for opportunities to innovate. Well, they didn't have to look far because they were coming to them, and they still said no. They had an opportunity to acquire Netflix and Redbox. Frankly, with the way they were operating, I think they might have killed Netflix. Now, something would have taken its place, but still, I like Netflix. I don't know about you guys. I'm glad it's still here. At one point in their history, they were actually, when they first started, they were buying these VHS tapes for about $65 a piece. And so once they covered the cost of that, everything else was gravy. Entire stores, when they would open a store and they would bring in all of the assets, within the first month, everything was paid for. Everything was paid for. All the movies, the building, the land, everything. That's how much cash they were generating. But at some point along the way, they made a key mistake when a movie studio came to them and said, we want to institute a revenue sharing model. That way you won't have to come up with all this upfront money and pay $65 times however many tapes. We'll simply give you those tapes and we'll do a 60-40 revenue share. Well, Blockbuster thought that was the best thing since sliced bread, but it ended up being one of the things that killed them. In fact, at a shareholder meeting at Disney back in 1999, Michael Eisner stood up and said revenue sharing was the best thing we ever did for the Disney company. It's one of the largest revenue sources we have now. So clearly it was good for them, not so much for Blockbuster. Had they said no to revenue sharing, they could have built their cash reserves to a crazy amount of money and done almost anything they wanted to create their own strategies, their own streaming, which they could have done. Instead, they waited until 2009 and they were doing it through TiVo, and it was a mess. Too little, too late. They could have created their own programming content. They could have, would have, should have. They did none of the things that were presented to them. They did none of the things that were clearly in place or coming into place. And so this is what we all talk about. You talk about referral partners and things. That's what we do at End Perspective. We go in with referral partners. We help companies we help them find blue oceans. We help them fix issues that they have. We do the things that are important to help people see where they could go, how they can be more, how they can exploit holes in the marketplace and so forth. And if you're not thinking about what's coming next, you're already in the process of dying. And I'm not going to belabor that point because you've heard it 100 times today. But please think about your business as it stands, no matter how successful you are. You know, tomorrow's a whole brand new day. So what are you doing to prepare yourselves for the future? Find that blue ocean, find that point of differentiation, do it, exploit it, and be better than you are. And I hope to see you guys all survive the next recession. If anybody has any quick questions, do it. Otherwise, I'm going to sit down and let the program continue.
Good deal.